Uh, Welcome to the town hall, budget town hall meeting for Las Cruces Public Schools. We are just want to thank you for joining us this afternoon and provide introductions to the panelists here. We have Interim Superintendent Mr. Ralph Ramos. We have Mr. Josh Silver, who's Associate Superintendent of Technology. Dr. Wendy Miller Tomlinson, who is the Deputy Superintendent of Instruction, Leadership, and Research, I believe, and Teacher Learning. Dr. Roberto Lozano, he is the Associate Superintendent of Equity, Innovation, and Social Justice. Mr. Sean Barham, Chief of Staff. Mr. Gabe Hawkes, Deputy Superintendent of Operations. And then we have our two great interpreters, our translators, Miss Vanessa, and you're both signed in as Vanessa, so I don't have your name, both of your names, but we have two translators here as well. So if you can put your names in the chat or in the, well, I guess you can't put that in the chat. We've disabled that feature. So anyway, so for those who are joining us and are wanting to ask questions, the question and answer feature is available, so you can submit questions, and we will be responding to those questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end of the presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started. Give me 1 second to get the PowerPoint up and running here. Okay, and if one of our panelists can confirm that that's visible, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Silver. Okay, so again, welcome to the 2021-2022 Budget Town Hall meeting. And just to kind of give you a brief overview of the budget calendar, the budget process starts in January and it runs through the end of May. And really, there's some additional work that happens in June and at the beginning of July, but the primary cycle is from January to May. And January to February, we begin the budget planning process, developing priorities, working with the Board of Education, doing the the community budget survey. And then we move into the preliminary budget development in the February-March timeframe, where we're doing a variety of different calculations and analyses. And then we start receiving final information from the Public Education Department at the end of March, and in April is where we start finalizing the budget. The process, or the stage that we're in now, is in the budget review, presentation, and approval, which runs from the end of April through the end of May. And this town hall is part of that last stage of the process. So the community budget survey was submitted or was published between the January 19th and February 19th. And this is a great opportunity for the public to provide input into the budget process. And it does provide us essential information in developing the budget. Those were available in both English and Spanish. And we've done this for the last couple of years. And this year we had an increase. So we've received a total of 1,973 responses, 1,907 in English, which is up a little bit, and 66 in Spanish, which was up from a little over 50 last year. The top 3 budget priorities that were selected from that survey were cleaning and sanitizing buildings and classrooms. And so in our budget, we have taken great consideration into providing the resources. We have backpack sprayers, we have supplies budgeted. We've purchased some throughout this year. We're going to be bringing on a pool of custodians to help with the cleaning and sanitizing. We'll be bringing on 10 custodians to help. Social distancing and other pandemic safety protocols was the second priority. We'll be providing schools with the resources to maintain that practice, as well as signage. They'll be able to start purchasing and providing that. So that was part of the budget priorities that we were able to implement for next fiscal year's budget. And then the third one was social, emotional, and behavioral support and resources. And so this is a really important priority, and the district has taken that seriously, understanding that need for that support. And we'll be adding 5 additional social workers to support those needs of our students and staff members. And here's a ranking of the all of the budget priorities. And so this is a consolidated ranking. Participants were asked what their first priority, second priority, and third priority were, but this is a consolidation of those priorities and what was selected. And so you can see here the top 10 listed, including the 3 we just went over, as well as security entrance improvements, improving the air quality in buildings and classrooms, additional after-school programs for expanded educational opportunities, extracurricular activities, career education programs for high school students, additional school days for expanded educational opportunities, and STEM education for elementary school students. So those are the top 10. I won't read the rest of them. And so all of those were taken into consideration as we were developing the budget. A second look at this would be a ranked choice. So these are the first choice, second choice, and third choice. And the priorities stayed basically the same, but a little bit different between the ranked choices. And this is just information that that you're able to take a look at, and just to get an idea of what the priorities and how they were selected. Okay, and so here are the Board of Education's priorities. As you can see, we listed them out here in different categories. The first category being the district financial priorities. So these are district-wide priorities that the district, when we met with the Board of Education in January at a board retreat, these were the priorities that they communicated to district's administration to take into consideration during the budget development process. Then there was a capital outlay category as well. And I won't read all of these. And then there was a category specific to operational budget, which is on the next slide. But these are all taken into consideration in addition to the priorities from the budget community budget survey as we develop the budget. And this was available at a board meeting, I believe at the beginning of February, when the Board of Education voted on these priorities. And there will be copies of this slide presentation available on our website for viewing as well. So taking a look at, after we get the budget priorities and we start working on the budget, one of the things that we take a look at is the enrollment trend. And so as we look at the enrollment trend over the last 5 years, we do look at an average of what we call the 80th and 120th day count days. And so there's 4 count days each year. One is on the 40th day of school, roughly. One is roughly on the 80th day of school, and then on the 120th, and there's end of year. School districts and charter schools in New Mexico who receive funding through the state equalization guarantee formula utilize the average of the 80th and 120th days of the current fiscal year for the next fiscal year. So our enrollment for this year is utilizing the funding formula for next year. And so as you look at the trend in that average of the 80th and 120th days, you can see there's been a slight decrease over the last 5 years, each year, of roughly about 1.5%. That's due primarily to a decrease in birth rates that we've been experiencing. And then as we get to the current year, you can see it significantly dropped off. This is primarily due to the pandemic, where students have opted to do different choices, whether it be homeschool or online schools. And so we are expecting a return of between 300 to 600 of those students in the upcoming school year. And so the SEG funding formula did have a hold harmless provision for growth, and so about 300 of those expected to return have been included in the funding formula. And so that's a total of a decrease from the previous year of 925.5, and we get the 0.5 because it's an average calculation. So as we take that into consideration, we look at the amount of funding that we're going to be receiving based on the number of students. And so in addition to the priorities that are developed, it's also really critical as far as the number of students that are anticipated to be enrolled in the upcoming school year as we look at the funding formula. Here's an overall summary of our budget. So this gives us a total, and this is by fund type. And so if you look down the fund type, the first column there, we have our general fund, capital projects fund, federal flow through, debt service, special revenue, federal direct, local, state flow through, and state direct. So those are different categories of funds, and with each of those categories are multiple funds, and each fund acts as a separate self-balancing set of books. And so each one is independent of each other, and funds don't cross between the funds, or monies don't cross between the funds. So we're looking at a total district-wide for our operating budget. And when we use the term operating budget, we're referring to the total district-wide budget for all funds, which is not to be confused with our operational fund, which is in the general fund category. So we're looking at a total of 3,532.07 FTEs for FY22 and a total operating budget of 466,960,143. Then taking a look at where those funds are coming from, this breaks it down again for the total operating budget. We have I apologize. So this is for our operational fund. So moving on to that operational fund. The operational fund is the fund that the district primarily operates out of. And so looking at the sources for the operational fund, we're looking at about 32 million in cash sources, 1.9 million in local sources, a little over 210 from state sources. This is primarily the state equalization guarantee. Federal sources, again, this is the operational fund, so this has to do with indirect costs, so that's just a little over $1 million. Other financing sources, which is miscellaneous items that we receive, and then other items of $1 million, that's E-rate reimbursements. So for the operational fund, we're looking at total budget sources of about 246,638,512. And looking at how those are broken out to be utilized, this is by function, and we use functions. These are the large categories of different types of activities. And so the 1,000 is the direct student instruction, and then we have support functions, student support services for students and instruction, and then we have administrative functions, general school, which is the school principal and the office staff, central services, which is here at the central office, as well as some other functions that support schools district-wide, and then operation and maintenance of plant, student transportation, and then other support services, food services, and community services operations. And so for the operational fund, we're looking at a total of 2,796.21 FTEs, and again 246,638,512 for the operational expenditures. And so that budget balances. The first three categories here are the functions. or what we call our instruction and instruction support. And we typically budget about 75% of our expenditures there in those top 3 lines. The other point here is to note in the 2900 other support services function, we have a little over 16 million there. The district is budgeting a operational reserve of 15.8 million, and that's located in that function. So looking at the operational budget trend over the last 5 years, you can see that we have increased. And so looking at from FY18, where we started at 194 million, and then currently at 246 million, which is a little over 3 million from the prior year. And so we did receive an increase in our unit value this year, which is part of the funding formula in the state equalization guarantee. And so last year we did have a decrease when the pandemic started. There was a special session in June of the state legislature, and that decreased our SEG funding. And so we're back up to where we were our funding post-COVID pandemic at this point in time. And then here it shows you the state equalization guarantee. And then, as you can see, the trend there the last few years. There's a little bit of variations between the years. In the FY20, we were receiving through the state equalization guarantee funding for our K5 Plus program in the summer, as well as our extended learning in FY21. And so when you take out the effects of the funding for K5 Plus and extended learning, that's where we're about even with what we were prior to the pandemic. So about 210 million in the state equalization guarantee. And so let's take a look at the FTEs and look at a trend for our FTEs. And those not familiar with the term FTE, that means full-time equivalent or our employees. And so we look at their positions. Employee that works full-time is a 1.0 FTE, an employee who works half-time is a 0.5. And so we look at that. So we do have splits in positions between funds. And so as we look at our FTEs, that we're talking about our employees. And so as you look at the top line, that's the trend district-wide, and then the bottom green line, that's the trend for the operational fund. And so we have seen an increase in FTEs over the last few years, and in district-wide, and also a slight increase in FTEs in the operational fund. And those have to do primarily with filling vacancies, not vacancies, but gaps in functionality within departments, but also a lot of teaching positions have been added as we can find gaps in those needs to balance out class loads. And I have a chart here that can show you a little bit of that. And so here, this is the 1400 series job class, which are teachers. And you can see the trend there over the last few years has been an increase. And so it's really important to note as we see an increase in these to balance out class loads and to help support the schools with a variety of core classes at the high schools and split classes at elementary schools. This year we did add a few positions to help support the middle schools. And but you can see as we've had an increase in positions and teaching positions over the last few years, but also note that we've had a decrease in enrollment. So as we've slightly increased teachers, we've also had a decrease in enrollment, which has helped to balance out those class loads and to eliminate some of the split level classes at elementary school, not completely, but some, and then also help to alleviate some of the pressure at the high schools or at the secondary level for overloaded classes. And so we've been balancing that out over the last few years. And then here's a list of some other major funding. So this is federal funding. These are the federal flow-through funding sources. And in here, we are, that first one, so these are the top ones. These aren't an exhaustive list of all of our funding sources, but these are the top funding sources. As you can see, the CARISA, which stands for the Coronavirus Relief, let me see here, I have the acronym written. Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. So this is a second round of stimulus that the federal government has provided in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're looking at about 29.7 million for fiscal year 22. And then we have, from there, we have our other federal funding that we utilize, Title I, and then there's a description of what these are used, kind of what these funds are and how the funds are utilized, as well as IDB, and then a few others there. So major federal funding flow through is about a little over 50 million, and a good portion of that 50 million, as you can see, is that 29 million in CARISA funds. And so here's some federal direct, and the difference between federal flow through and federal direct. When it says federal flow through, it flows through another party, and the majority of the time it flows through the public education department. We do also receive some funding directly from the federal government, and we have Title 19 Medicaid. That's a little over 12 million. Also our Head Start. We do provide some, we have support for some of the health and social services functions, which is primarily for preschool at Las Cruces High School. We receive some tuition and meal reimbursements. And then the SNAP program has to do with providing education and healthy choice, healthy eating choices related to the SNAP Ed or the food stamp program. And so in the federal direct, it's a little over 16.8 million. Other major funding sources outside of the operational, capital, and others are in nutrition services. This is a USDA funded source that provides for our student meals, so student lunch and breakfast programs. Our transportation funding, which is part of our general fund, a little over 4.6 million. Our local funding sources, which is the spaceport. This has to do with the Doñana County gross receipts tax for the spaceport. The three school districts in New Mexico, or in Doñana County, Hatch, Las Cruces, and Gadsden receive a portion of those gross receipts tax. And then our New Mexico pre-K, which is helping us grow our pre-K classrooms, so a little over 1.7 million, and then our athletics funds, which primarily comes from ticket sales. So other major funding sources is a little over 24.9 million. And so that's the end of the presentation on the budget. Copies of this slide presentation, as well as a copy of the proposed operating budget, can be found on the Finance Sunshine portal under the budget section next fiscal year. And then the slides will also be available for you there as well in that same section. And there's a direct link to the proposed operating budget here, but it can also be found in that Sunshine portal section, as well as the slideshow. And so with that, we'll look and see if there's any questions in the question and answer. And at this time, it does not look like there are any questions. And so I'll leave it up to, I'll turn it over to our panelists if they have anything else they would like to add or any questions they would like to ask at this point in time. Does it look like our panelists have anything to add? And so we'll stop the slideshow. And again, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. Mr. Ramos, did you?
No, but I just want to thank you, Ed, for being transparent and showing us all these slides and having this town hall meeting. I know that our whole leadership, brain power has worked together to, come up with this plan as well. And we're still continuing to plan and work with our budget, and expenditures for this next year, so we can assure our teachers, as we go into this next school year, that we have the instructional tools to have ready for them to get started, this next school year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ramos. I appreciate those comments. And a copy or a link to this presentation will be available on our website for later viewing. So those who weren't able to join us this afternoon, and I know it's Friday afternoon at well, it's 4:30 now. We started at 4. I know that's probably a little difficult for some, but this will be available for viewing on our website. And again, I want to thank those of you who joined us for this budget town hall this afternoon. Your support is very much appreciated. Thank you.